It's The World This Week, The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. Joining us, Vivian Walt, Paris correspondent for Time magazine. How are you?
Really good.
Really good. Okay. A high bar set there. Independent journalist Aisha Gulsert is with us as well. How are things?
Alive.
Alive, okay. Borzu Daragahi, international correspondent for The Independent. Are you alive?
I am, yes.
Okay. Thanks for Thanks for doing this. All is well. Columnist, commentator, communications consultant, Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet. How are things?
Alive and kicking.
Alive.
We are back into
Okay.
parliaments now, so parliamentary affairs.
And we shall talk about it later. Philippe raising the stakes there. By the way, listen, like, and subscribe to The World This Week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other fine streaming services. A 100-year-old gun law gone, a half-century of abortion rights overturned. It's a U.S. Supreme Court stacked with Republican appointees that has moved the needle to the right. 6-3, the ruling along ideological lines as the court overturned the 1973 decision that legalized abortion across the United States. In that majority opinion, they've sent it back to the states to decide each one
We hold
on
that
their
row and
own.
case.
Decide on each one to decide on their own. The authority to regulate abortion, they say, return to the people and to their elected representatives. Vivian Walt, you've seen the images of the Attorney General of Missouri, for instance, immediately signing into law a bill that makes abortion illegal.
You now have at least, I believe, half the country who effectively will not have access to abortion. And of course, as Biden just said a little while ago in his address, it affects most of all poor women. It's fine for, middle, upper class women who can jet across the country to California, New York, and still find an abortion. But for many, many women, it's simply not an option, and the consequences are drastic. And it's not simply drastic in terms of abortion. It's just a slew of different rights that are just being hacked away at. The loosening of gun rights. Probably the next to go is climate law and gay marriage. So you're left with a very, very different country than we had a decade ago.
How do you explain it? Because in the case of abortion, those who are in support of this decision say it's a religious question. It's about protecting life.
When you think that this really is a consequence that came out of Donald Trump's presidency, a president who is, by, wide agreement, a serial adulterer, many times, accused of sexual assault. It's just kind of mind-boggling. And I think that, there's a whole complex of different things, including, of course, the very, very low rate of people voting who are young Americans. Young Americans simply don't go to the polls. And you have really, serious consequences to that, rippling right through the political system.
All right, the reactions from outside the Supreme Court, and we saw young Americans, by the way, some of them supporting the decision by the U.S. Supreme Court.
We have thousands of women, tens of thousands of women across this country who believe that life is sacred, that the sanctity of life is worth protecting, and we have a legacy of women that go before us and have paved this path.
We are the Berlin generation, and we just abolished abortion! We are the Berlin generation, and we just abolished abortion!
Aisha Gulsert, your reaction?
Well, a couple of things that to what Viviana said, I completely agree, of course. But, it's not only what we see is not just a mark of Trumpism. In the U.S. has become the religious right political movement has been quite adamant in leaving its mark since the 1980s in the U.S. So these are the culture wars that we are talking about now. is not something that we just begun in 2016 to speak about, whether it's gun laws, abortion, discrimination against race, affirmative action, whether to have it in universities or not. So it is something that's going on. The only thing that kind of, quote unquote, gives me hope, if we can find one, is that maybe this will be an alarm, a wake-up call to the Democrats, the ones who are quite moderate and who actually are not going into taking action. Women even who have not. We've seen that when Trump won as well. There needs something. Sometimes there needs to be something like a tectonic. Like a shift.
A tectonic shift.
Yes, shift in order for people to want to support more the other side, which will be the Democrats.
And there are midterm elections coming up. The U.S. president, in his remarks, squarely putting it in those terms.
This fall, we must elect more senators and representatives who will codify women's right to choose into federal law once again. Elect more state leaders to protect this right at the local level. We need to restore the protections of Roe as law of the land. We need to elect officials who will do that. This fall, Roe is on the ballot.
Borzu Dargahi, your reaction to those words?
It seems like we're living in the United States is a country with two different political games. One played by the Democrats, which is this very polite, let's go to the polls, let's organize. And then a much dirtier, uglier culture war being fought by the Republicans and the right. And the Democrat people, Biden doesn't have a chance. He's going to get steamrolled. No, they're going to lose the legislative elections in the fall. They're going to lose control because they do not deliver.
A majority of Americans,
but they don't deliver.
Support his side on this.
But they don't vote. That's the problem, as has been pointed out. They don't vote. They won't vote. There's no inspiration to vote. They had the control of the look. These guys are playing almost an old-fashioned parlor game against a bunch of mafiosi. This is exactly what's happening in the United States. These guys had a chance. They could have arrested Donald Trump on January 21st. Okay, they could have widened the Supreme Court. They had the numbers in the Congress and the Senate to widen the Supreme Court, to dilute the effect of this these right-wing appointees. They could have played a much more ruthless game, but no, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, they want to play nice with the Republicans, and those Republicans, this is the game they play. It's dirty, it's tough.
We heard Joe Biden in those remarks say that he's going to do everything he can to protect women's rights to travel, because there are women who are going to cross state lines now to get abortions.
I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means that they're going to give stipends to women to be able to take flights to go to other parts of the country. There's talk, for example, an incredible story about Mexicans helping women in Texas gain access to health care. There's all sorts of different possibilities. Bottom line, this is all happening because people like Joe Biden failed. People like Nancy Pelosi failed over the last decades.
Ooh, Borzu, I think you're very tough in the sense of, don't forget that there are also Americans who are supporting these people. It's not like only Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi who are behind the fact that there are Americans as well. America is not just, better than I do, you're American. It's just not New York or, half of the country, just like Viviane said, is actually
it's not half the country.
It's
not half the country. If you look at the polling numbers,
according to the polls that Pew just came out with, half of the country will most likely vote in order to ban abortion. So that's also Americans. It's not just two politicians who are doing this. But just one line. I completely agree with you that it's a dirty game that the Republicans are playing by being very aggressive. And the thing is that it's a very dangerous game. And Borzu is so right. Because to use the Supreme Court in a way to show that they're, in a way, not the premium of what rule of law should be, that makes you, citizens, not want to believe in what the Supreme Court represents in this country. And that's dangerous.
Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet, when you watch what's going on in the United States, the culture wars as we're describing them, this just same old, or is this a new level?
No, that's a whole new level. It's been designed mainly, these new tactics have been designed, for instance, in Russia. They used farm trolls, trolling farms, I don't know how to qualify them. That's the centers of production for fake news targeted to small groups of conservative or ultra-conservative people in order to, push their agenda. They're doing it all the time, and the progressives, the Bidens of this world, they don't know how to use these tactics, but they don't know how to fight them. So the conservatives are much more powerful than the Democrats in pushing their agenda through the social media. And that's why you end up with PR stunts, with young people defending their positions, as we saw tonight. That's because
and international media picking it up.
And international media picking up because they know how to do this. And it's an all new warfare, and we are not built to fight it. In France, it took months in order for us to get rid of Russia today.
But Borzu and I both know Americans who are anti-abortion and who are young.
Sure.
They exist. It's not.
Yeah, but they're small. They're fringe. Let's be honest.
No,
I agree with you.
They're a fringe. I know my country. Okay, I mean they're a fringe. The people who are they will personally not get an abortion. They think it's horrible. They think it's terrible. Are a lot. The people who want to ban it for other people, for other women, are few.
I think the stakes are so high now that you have to call a defeat a defeat. Okay, this is a battle that has been lost. This is terrible. So you should be angry at the persons that should have won this war, and we should warn them in order for them to win the next one. Because it's coming in France too because of the same factors, aging population, only the elderly vote, and they do vote ultra-conservative laws because they don't care about abortion anymore. They're not, concerned by it.
I mean, I'm having a difficulty understanding. Sorry, and then I'm done. Understanding this. We are talking about it as if it's a shock. Yes, it is shock, but I mean, Roe versus Wade is something that we've been talking about in the U.S. for decades. I mean, and also don't forget that this is a country, America, where we swear by God, where religion is taking a huge space. In God we trust.
No, but
I mean, the politics and the religion and the moral and the conservatives have been more and more involved into politics.
It's not immune to other trends in the West.
Yeah, but that's what you're saying. You're saying
that's not the same context, man. Their relationship with God is not the same.
Quick final word on this from Vivian Wald.
I think that Borja is quite right, that the passion, the energy is on the right, and it's not on the Democrats, and that's on them. There's no one else to blame. The Democrats shoulder a lot of blame for this. They have failed to kind of, basically inspire a movement which was desperately needed, and they've failed for the last, you would say 6 years, really. And I don't know when they get that back. It's going to take a while.
They kicked out a sitting president.
Yes.
It took a turn.
He kicked himself out.
But, I mean, my God, the fact that was even in question was quite astonishing if you think everything that went on. But I think, there are sort of structural things about the American political system which have really come to a kind of breaking point. The fact that you have these 9 justices that are appointed for life has always seemed to me the most bizarre concept. And it's become increasingly bizarre. And there are a lot of things about the democratic structure in America, which is really strange.
And also, François, it took a lot of strength in order to, get rid of Trump. It was an alliance between the ACLU and the big corporations in order to get rid of that guy because both of them didn't want him anymore. That was a unique thing in American history. I'm not too sure that the Democrats did win that by themselves.
Culture wars across the Atlantic, military war here in Europe, Russia's pounding of Ukraine's east bearing fruits. Severodonetsk now set to fall, and the Shansk perhaps soon to follow.
Unfortunately, yes, our boys will have to be withdrawn. But this is what we have been talking about. There is no need to talk about so-called betrayal, as nobody is going to abandon our boys. No one will let encirclement happen, and no one is going to have a careless attitude.
Your reaction to that, Vivian Wald?
kind of inevitable, and probably the correct decision. The losses are enormous. They're completely outgunned, although obviously not in the sense politically. I mean, globally, politically, they're winning this war, but that doesn't count on the front line.
Is it impossible, even if they you can spin it whatever way you want, Borzodargai retreating to attack better, etc., when you have one side that doesn't care about using infantry as cannon fodder?
Yeah, I mean, that is a big problem for the Ukrainians in this conflict. They have a public to account for. They have grieving mothers that they are answerable to. And Vladimir Putin doesn't have to deal with that. Vladimir Putin doesn't have to address his mistakes and doesn't have to deal with the consequences of the many Russians that have died in this conflict. So that's a big difference, and that's probably on the part of the Ukrainian military commanders. It was probably the humane thing to do to spare their young men the death of being in this war.
All right, far from the front, there is a morale boost that came from Brussels. The EU27 green-lighting candidacy status for Ukraine and neighboring Moldova, and to think that it all started back in 2013 when Vladimir Putin pressured Kyiv to pull the plug on a trade pact with the bloc.
Today it is recognized that Ukraine is not a bridge, not a pillow between the West and Russia, not a buffer between Europe and Asia, not a sphere of influence, not a gray zone, not a transit territory, not the border between orcs and elves. Ukraine is a future equal partner for at least 27 EU countries.
Not the border between orcs and elves, says Volodymyr Zelensky. Your reaction to that?
Well, I think it's good news, but I think coming from Turkey, you should not be that. Ukraine should not be that excited. I mean, we've been trying as Turkey for like 22, 23 years to be a part of the EU. We've which I'm glad we are not, but that's another topic. But it's not something, it takes time to be a member state. And not only that, is that where Ukraine is today, even before war, it is not ready to join the bloc of the 27 of the European Union, whether it's corruption, whether it's rule of law, whether it's censorship. So there's still a long way to go.
A long way to go. And there's the question as well, can you join the bloc if your economy isn't the same size? Per capita, Ukrainians are 3 times poorer than the EU's poorest member, Bulgaria.
The stakes are political now. This is not an economical decision. We don't expect the Ukrainians to go by our budgetary policies. That's not the point anymore. We are saving them possibly from a war. We are trying to save them politically, to raise the stakes, to have a kind of an equilibrium with Russia. And what we saw this week was the 27 aligned themselves with Ukraine at the same time when Vladimir Putin was seeking help actively. He addressed the BRICS at their summit, trying to gain some allies. So we see that there is a global battle with 2 global leaders. One is Zelensky, very efficient at talking to every parliament on earth that would listen to him. That's the first global leader that we have in our history. I mean, he's really a global political leader. He's a global Obama, if you want. And on the other side...
And everybody's been, by the way, playing the clip today of... he used to have this TV show where he played the president in this clip of him getting a phone call from Angela Merkel saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, we thought you were Macedonia or Montenegro."
Montenegro, yeah.
He receives a phone call and he thinks that he is admitted inside the EU, and that's Angela Merkel. And Angela Merkel says, "Oh, that's my bad. I thought it was Macedonia." And it's very funny. But he's at the gates, and I do hope that he will be able to be protected, somehow more protected by that.
Borzodargai, the way Philippe there portrays it, this scramble for friends and allies, how's it going?
I mean, I think in terms of Ukraine, it's going really well. I think that, and Russia is doing really poorly in terms of finding friends and allies. He was even not able to find a friend really on the podium with Kazakhstan recently, which dismissed his territorial claims on various
a return to the old Soviet Union.
What is kind of interesting also is that, when this news of the EU accession process began and came out, Putin downplayed it, even though, as you pointed out, in 2013, it was the cause of all of the unrest. The thing is that, this is something that Putin is probably very angry about, because the EU is no longer just an economic bloc. It's increasingly becoming a security bloc as well, and a security cooperation sort of arrangement. And so this is more than just, Turkey was a problematic case. It could be argued if Turkey would have stayed the course that it was on, it would have had a much better chance of getting into the EU.
But then you can answer to that saying maybe in 2008, if Sarkozy and Merkel didn't really humiliate, Turkey in that way, maybe they would have continued those steps. You never know. Yeah. But the thing is that I'm not that positive about that union of the European Union today. I mean, when we look at the statements and the actions, in a way, particularly the statements by Hungary and Poland, I think that if the European Union is really united on all fronts against Russia and for Ukraine and on other matters, I think it is a very fragile union for now, because you do have really two countries that are not really eager to go for the long run on the side of
rule of law.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And what's certain is that there is going to be a boomerang effect. It was not officially on the agenda at that EU summit, but all the talk was, well, better start stockpiling natural gas for the winter. Germany fretting over whether Russia will reopen the tap after next month's annual maintenance of the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, and raising their alert level as Europe braces for possible power shortages and rationing down the line.
We are heading towards a winter that may be difficult. We see that some countries are organizing themselves for the coming months to get less gas supply. We will only be able to get through a difficult period if we do it together.
So EU bashing, pretty safe sport, especially at the beginning of the pandemic when they couldn't agree on masks. And then they said, what's this pooling your resources when it comes to purchasing vaccines? In the end, it kind of worked. Here you're saying we're going to have to pool our resources when it comes to energy. How's that going to go, Vivian Walt?
It's very difficult to see how it's going to go, especially in the wake of the kind of re-evaluation, shall we say, of Merkel's legacy in the last couple of months. The fact that you have the biggest economy in the EU so overwhelmingly dependent on Russian energy. And to unwind that is not going to be an easy matter at all, or a quick one. So I think that, underneath all this kind of kumbaya spirit that you see in Brussels at the moment, there's a lot of, I think, somewhat resentment among some EU members as to the kind of predicament that they now find themselves
it really
in.
is, Philippe Molchevole, impossible to know how public opinion will react when the time comes. If the Germans just put on an extra sweater in the winter, or if they turn against their leaders and say enough of this war in Ukraine.
It very well may be that there would be a turn in the public opinion against this war in Ukraine if we have to endure more restrictions concerning energy, because we already went through a lot of discussions about the price of energy, and the popular classes have been making huge sacrifice on their, the way they dress, the way they can exercise their right to travel, the way to, spend time with their kids. They can't go to the movies, they can't go to the restaurants, they can't go to any place without spending money, and they don't have any more money to spend. So if we increase the level of restrictions, the level of prices, we may very well see trouble in our country, and maybe a turn in that public opinion against the war.
Yeah, war fueling an energy crisis, fueling inflation, as Philippe was saying, upending alliances, and forcing a rethink of old rivalries. Turkey's president this week rolling out the red carpet, or should I say the blue carpet, I don't know why it's blue, for the Saudi crown prince. Unthinkable until recently, after the 2018 assassination of dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Takes two to tango, Ayşegül Sert. Why this coming together?
Well, there are a couple of things. One, Turkey is really in a bad situation right now, and which means Erdogan. We have elections next year, which might be early elections. The economy is not doing well. You said the key word, the inflation. So he really needs very badly to find money somewhere. This is not the first country that he's turning to in order to get the money. There are also deals that have been done with the United Arab Emirates recently. So he needs to have in the region more allies because economically he's not doing well. That's the first thing. Second of all, I don't know if you remember, we were talking about the U.S., the Prince of Bel-Air with Will Smith when he was young. I feel like the crown prince is kind of like the prince of PR. He's coming back into the whatever he does. He was, because of the Khashoggi murder, the country was put on the side, so he needs to do as much PR as he can. Don't forget, before coming to Turkey, one of the countries he visited was Jordan. And Biden, in a month, is actually going to visit as well this country. What really hurts me is to know that we forget things very easily. In terms of, there is a journalist who has been dismembered, murdered, and after, 3 years and a half, we just put it under the table because, you know what, money and deals matter more.
If it's maybe it's comforting thought that I guess in New York, the street that is harboring the Saudi Arabia embassy has been rebranded. The new name is Shaghogi Street, so it's interesting.
I mean, I will just add that I think that MBS gets a lot out of this visit. He ahead of the Biden visit to Saudi Arabia next month, including showing the world, look, I'm a responsible guy now. I put the Khashoggi file behind me. I'm a regional leader, not just a Saudi leader.
Seems to be,
I've grown. He even though he hasn't said I'm sorry and I learned, I think he's sending the message. Look, I've grown. I've made changes.
But there seem to be bigger things at play. We have the Emir of Qatar going to Egypt. What's that about?
Yeah, I mean, you have a real broad realignment in the whole region. It's just caused by the Ukraine war, where transport and energy links are being rerouted towards the south because trucks can't get from Turkmenistan to Europe anymore via Russia and Ukraine because there's a war. So they're going to have to go through the south. That's like, for example, gas has to get through. Gas lines are being redrawn. Couple that with the U.S. kind of withdrawing itself from the region, and there's
Iran as well.
Well, even Iran is being dealt in to a small extent. The Saudis are talking to Iran again. The UAE has totally patched up relations with Iran, and what is happening is basically a reconfiguration of the region, a recognition that regional countries have to fill the security vacuum, and so they're talking to each other. It's not huge. There's still not a lot of trade between some of these areas, but they're talking to each other and they're trying to resolve their differences in the absence of a regional hegemon.
All right. Speaking of alliances, France's new president is going to have to learn how to make them. Emmanuel Macron, re-elected in April, but losing his centrist majority in parliament last Sunday, while he bargains with the left, the conservatives, the far right, he's trying to accentuate the positive.
The legislative elections have made the presidential majority the largest political group in the National Assembly. However, this is a new fact, and as in most Western democracies, whether it's in Germany, Italy, or many others, no political force today can make the laws alone.
So you hear that, Vivian Wald. France is just a normal country, and it's just like Germany or Italy or any other parliamentary democracy.
It has not been in the last 4 months, and that's been quite clear. I mean,
4 months, 4 years, you mean?
Let's just talk about the war. The last 4 months, in fact, the last 4 months of President Macron's first 5-year term as president, in which he really took very seriously his role as leader of Europe and was on the phone constantly with Mario Draghi and Olaf Scholz and Boris Johnson, etc., etc. And he is paying the price for that in some ways. He was no longer a campaigner. He did not, until the very last moment, really campaign for his own re-election. And he took it for granted. And whether or not he can actually do something which seems somewhat against his DNA, which is to make kind of coalitions and listen to people and follow their lead. I think it's going to be a messy period.
Can he go on a listening tour, Emmanuel Macron? Is that in his nature?
He has in his nature to be the absolute monarch that the French are looking for. In the same time, as he would say, we are killing our monarchs on a regular basis. So he's learning. I think it's a learning curve.
By the way, our correspondent in Brussels, Philippe, Dave Keating, during covering the summit, I asked him, I said, so how does everyone feel about Emmanuel Macron getting his wings clipped? He said, yeah, people are taking it in stride because they know the French president has a lot of power. He can
No, 70% of the population is quite happy with the present arrangement because they wanted him to be re-elected because there was no one else.
But they don't even seem that concerned.
But there was no one else. They couldn't pick any other guy. We couldn't choose Marine Le Pen in the current circumstances. We couldn't vote for Jean-Luc Mélenchon. They are both, unreliable, extreme populist types. This guy was the only reasonable guy we had. So we vote for him for president. But when it comes to real politics, when we have, again, a choice to make, we express our disagreement with the way he rules.
Yeah, and the feeling is, this is just the French being the French. And in any case...
No. Pragmatic. And
pragmatism.
Good point. Yeah,
Viviane said something very right in the sense of when she said, well, Macron is going to have to listen. And I think this second term is actually going to be that. He's gonna not only listen, I think, at least he's gonna have to learn. He's gonna learn
that he went on
Let me finish.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. And he's gonna also have to learn the word compromise. Mm-hmm. And that is something, exactly what you were saying, that royalist, mercurial, Jupiterian, whatever way of governing is not going to work. But he has to learn to compromise. He has to learn to listen. And he has to stop to try to govern from the top to the bottom.
To bring this matter to the previous matter that we discussed, his royalist tone, his natural tendency to, speak as a kind of big historical figure could come in helpful when those gas prices go up. What Europe needs more than anything right now is leadership.
So he's still the king of Europe, is what you're saying?
But, I think he could be if he explained to the people, if he explained to the French, inspired Olaf Scholz to explain to the Germans, look, we are fighting a war. We are fighting a generational war, and we are going to have to sacrifice a bit. It means maybe you can't go on the expensive holiday you wanted to go on. Maybe it means you have to wear a layer of fleece when you go to bed at night. But we are being blackmailed by a big mafiosi. We are in a moment of crisis. And if he would explain that to people, if someone would explain that to people, maybe the coming crisis...
He can't even explain his own program to his own people.
I'm not sure if Macron is really the guy for the task, just given the fact that France is the one major country in Europe that is not particularly dependent on Russian energy.
Yeah, but gas prices go up, oil prices go up everywhere.
That's true. Everybody is. But, what's amazing is, after the whole yellow vest movement, the Gilets jaunes, when Macron went all over the country doing this quite extraordinary thing, his big listening tour, and he listened to every single French person in the country, it seemed, and then just went ahead and did whatever he wanted. And I don't think this is going to work this time.
But I think you're right. He has lost interest in ruling France. He wants to rule Europe. I think you're very right on that. I think the France is a little bit like the boring husband on the boring wife. You have to go, you have to go to restaurants.
He's got a short attention span, according to
It's like that meme.
No, I think
where the guy is looking at it.
Yeah, he's looking at his mistress, or I don't know how to translate
This
it.
is so not me too.
You know what I said the boring husband or the boring wife. You can be bored by both, hopefully. And he wants to go to the restaurant with the new exciting thing, which is Europe. And I think that's exactly the point. He's not been campaigning because he has lost interest in ruling France. It's too small for him.
Philippe, 7:59 p.m. last Sunday night, we were in this very studio and we get our first Deep South poll. And honestly, the big shock wasn't so much that Macron had lost his majority for all the reasons that you've all spelled out. It was the 89 seats for the far-right national rally.
The new problem is we want him to listen, but we want to be sure that on his Spotify playlist there won't be any extreme right leader, because the big fear that we can have now is an alliance between Macron and Marine Le Pen in order to have a majority in parliament, even if it's a temporary thing, even if it is for some measures and not others. There could be a temptation on the part of Macron to, try this, because it's not been tried yet.
No, but also I don't buy that. I think it will be, if he's going to do alliance, it's going to be the right.
Spent 5
Yeah, but
years
the normal-
Wait, one at a time.
The normal conservative right has dismissed the idea to, cooperate with Macron so as to find allies elsewhere.
I should go, sir.
Well, the other
Sorry.
thing, no, it's okay. I'm going to just say, to continue on Spotify, also, he should not have the Internationale also on his
No, he has not.
playlist
We are pretty
either,
sure he has not. He's not been listening
yes,
to that.
But the thing is, I don't think that there can be an alliance with the Rassemblement National. I don't know, but I'm more keen, or not keen, but I have the impression as a foreign observer that if there's an alliance that he's going to try to do, no matter the fact that now it's not really something that they want to do, it will be with the Les Républicains, with the right.
With the Conservatives.
With the Conservatives, exactly. Because the other two, just like very rightly you pointed,
but the
are too
Conservatives don't
extreme
want to.
or too radical. At some point, compromise.
I don't think he'll make a kind of a continual coalition. He will do, he'll pick up whatever votes he's going to have to spend a lot of time lobbying, MPs, which he never did before, as far as I know. And that's going to be a whole new thing for him.
All right. It's the first summer. We've been talking about all that might happen next winter. It's first summer's only begun, and it's the first one since COVID where Europe is fully open for business. But it can't be business as usual. Say transport workers burnt out by the pandemic, out of pocket with inflation. They kicked off this holiday season with Britain's biggest rail strike in decades. Act 3 of that, by the way, is on Saturday. Mass transit strikes here in France and walkouts at airlines that already face serious staffing issues like budget carriers EasyJet and Ryanair.
It's not just discrimination at work. Working conditions are terrible. We usually never deny people a glass of water, but at Ryanair, a crew member is not even allowed to take a bottle of water on a flight.
Coming out of COVID, we are seeing huge disruptions, Borzo Dargahi, and these disruptions to people's creature comforts, like being able to travel wherever they want by plane. Suddenly you can't take it for granted.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that, I absolutely think it's important for people to have the right to strike, and it's a crucial part of democracy and civil society. But I will say that, it's not just unionized transit workers who are the ones who have been suffering and burnt out. It's us journalists too, hitting. But it's also people who work at Amazon Workshop, people who work for as bike messengers.
There's staffing issues in emergency
I think
emergency wards at hospitals.
That, exactly. And I think that it's a little bit unfair, and I'm going to get kind of dissed for this by some people. It's a little bit unfair for people. Okay, when you're talking about luxury travel, that's one thing. But it's a little bit unfair for, subway strikes and metro strikes when that disrupts the lives of so many ordinary working class people as well. And there should be, if there is going to be labor action, there should be more solidarity, not just specified to specific unions. If you really want to do it right, unions, do a general strike. If you really want to send a message, instead of making it so that that poor Uber guy who needs to get somewhere can't because of the transit strike.
We were talking about, when we were talking about gas prices and Ukraine, we thought that, this winter might be a cold winter. I think this summer, as they say, is going to be the summer of discontent. It's the only strikes are not going to be the ones the ones that we are seeing today. They're also exactly of teachers, of medical workers. On the other hand, I think that what we see in the U.S. today, for instance, you mentioned Amazon, of people who work for Amazon, people who work for Starbucks, who have not been unionized in a country where in the 80s, 25% of Americans workers were a part of the unions. Today it's 10%, so it has really diminished. So to see that there's also something good with the trade unions and with the fact that they're trying to have their voice heard. Then there's something about called timing. Since timing is everything, strategically, unfortunately, if they want to bring change, they have to strike it where it hurts, which means summer or vacation time.
And have we forgotten about, remember when we clapped for carers at the beginning of the pandemic?
Health workers.
Yeah.
I think certainly in France, where we're sitting, there has been for a very long time real problems with wage earners. People earning way too little in many, many parts of the economy.
Because right now unemployment's at its lowest level in years in this country.
Exactly.
But it's not just
this
unemployment.
Incredible economy, actually. The French economy is going gangbusters. But for regular working people, their take-home pay is kind of shockingly low compared to most developed, rich countries in the world. And I think that it is more than simply how much you can afford to buy. It's also the gap in rich and poor.
And by the way, it's not just the airlines, say picketers at London's Gatwick Airport, who are demanding that their government support them.
Es que también la industria, toda la parte de hoteles, bares, todo está cayendo. O se abre el mercado para que esto pueda volver a resurgir, o todos vamos a terminar muy, muy mal.
Also, the hotel and bar industry, we need support. That brings me, I'm sorry, I'm still haunted by what you said earlier about the French president perhaps doing deals with the right, because polling suggests that what the French want, and by the sound of it, the Spanish and the British, is for policies to shift to the left, not towards the conservatives in this climate.
Yeah, but the fact is, in France, maybe it's unique, but the far right has captured the votes from the popular classes on social grounds. So nowadays,
so will the state protect people?
The state has been, the French state has been overly protective of people during the crisis. I mean, the one good thing that the government did, everyone agrees on that, has been protecting the economy. In particular, the hotels, restaurants sector. We did that. I mean, that's the one right thing we did. We did many, many mistakes, including not planning for the next wave of the pandemic. We didn't do that because who cares? But we took care of the economy. But the fact is, if you want to have social claims now, if you want to really do that politically, you have to go on the far right to be represented. That's the main problem. Efficiently, I mean.
Vivian Walt, right now, looking ahead then to this, you heard Aisha Gul's prediction of a hot summer. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, people have been saying this actually from before the presidential election. It was all very well for Macron to win another term in office, but that all the kind of anger that had been bubbling up was going to come out on the streets. And every political analyst that I interviewed in the months leading up to the presidential election was saying, just wait for this summer. And the fact that nobody's been able to really express their feelings through this presidential campaign is really going to have a kind of backfiring effect.
But this is not only in France, it's a European thing. You mentioned, former UK. I mean, UK, former European country, but there's Spain, there's Italy. There are a lot of different. France is not. It's not going to be boiling hot only in France. It's going to be very difficult, I think, in Europe. And as we have seen with the strikes, I mean, there are different. Portuguese airlines or Brussels Airlines too are completely in a difficult situation right now with the strikes as well.
I mean, there's just two words that come to mind that you would solve so many problems in the U.S., in Europe, etc. Tax billionaires. That's all I'll say. And it's something that Macron can't say, and it's something that Joe Biden can't say.
But it's something that Borzu Dargahi said. I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank Vivian Walt, Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet, Aisha Gould-Sert. Thank you for being with us here in The World This Week.